नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। ॐ नमो भगवते नारायणाय। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। अनन्तसंसारसमुद्रतार नौकायिताभ्यां गुरुभक्तिदाभ्यां वैराग्यसाम्राज्यदपूजनाभ्यां नमो नमः श्री गुरुपादुकाभ्याम्। अञ्जनानन्दनं वीरं जानकी शोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षहन्तारं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करम्। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। Namaskaram all of you. We saw in the last session how Sri Narayana Tirtha, a reincarnation of Sri Vedavyasa, stated in the Mangalalaya Kirtanam, Ati Karuna Vidrita Adbhuta Rupa, following the footsteps of Sri Vedavyasa, who said, Kalau Janishyamananam Dukkha Shoka Tamonudam. Kalau Janishyamananam Dukkha Shoka Tamonudam. Anugrahaya Bhaktanam Supunyam Vyatanodyashaha. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Vedavyasa said, the Narsimhavatara, Ramavatara and Krishnavatara are three significant manifestations of all the avatars that Brahman took from time to time. Since all three of them were occasioned out of extraordinary compassion of Sriman Narayana to protect his dear devotees such as Prahlada and many more in all those incarnations as we saw last session. Thus the prefix Adbhuta for every one of those avatars which Narayana Tirtha faithfully followed in the footsteps of Sri Vedavyasa. Alaukikam idam rupam, alaukikam idam rupam, alokya Anakadundubihi. Alaukikamidam rupam alokya Anakadundubihi. Hare sabharyaha pravocha. Hare sabharya provacha. Kamsadbhitaha The great Vasudeva, known as Anakadundubi, witnessed that remarkable and fascinating sight of your uncommon and magnificent form. But afraid of Kamsa for all the right reasons, he spoke in wonderment and concern as always. I may have briefly mentioned the history behind this term Anakadundubi in our Narayaniam series, but let us recap some of it at least with anecdotes. Anakadundubi name was given at birth of Vasudeva. Actually, it is made up of two separate words, Anaka, Dundubi. But whenever they refer to Vasudeva, many Puranas referred in one term as Anaka Dundubi. Harivamsa says, Vasudevo Mahabahuhu Purvam Anaka Dundubihi. Jagne yasya prasutasya Dundubibhyaha Pranadandivi. Jagne yasya prasutasya Dundubibhyaha Pranadandivi. Anakanam cha samhradaha sumahana bhavaddivi. This is how Harivamsa describes. When Vasudeva was born, the Anakas, Anaka is actually a kettle drum. It's also known as a mutinga, mutinga or mudinga. In fact, historians and musicologists believe this kettle drum, which was originally a mutinga with both sides, which became mudinga, later became mridanga. So this Anaka and Dundubis were sounded as if in a festival in the house of Sura by the gods. As mentioned in Brahmanda Purana in multiple places, in chapter 71, 146, 164, in chapter 3, numerous slokas, 71, 146, 164, 217, there is reference to Anaka Dundubi all over the place in Brahmanda Purana. Of course, Matsya Purana also talks about this term in multiple places. Vishnu Purana in the second Parva, in the fifth Parva, second chapter, in a couple of slokas there is mention. Since everyone felt relieved that Sri Vasudeva will become the father of Purnavatara Brahman to be born as Krishna, they had reason to rejoice so loud, and they were ecstatic when both Anakas and Dundubis were sounded at the time of his birth. This is how Harivamsa and various Puranas describe the rationale. Anaka, the kettle drum that existed from the times of Ramayana or Treta Yuga, is very close to Berihai that we say often mentioned in ancient Tamil literature from the times of Chilapadigaram. Most of you must have heard the name Berihai. They call it Berikai or Berihai. But that is the one which they were using it from Treta Yuga times. That is that kettle drum which can be taken back to the term Anaka from the times of Treta Yuga. Some historians claim that this was a two-sided drum known as mutinga or mudinga, which could have become mridanga or mattalam from the earliest Sangam literature. So Berikai and mattalam, there is a little bit of confusion even in the old Tamil literature. There are numerous names of many of the Laya instruments in Tamil literature. Those of you who are curious, you may see that these names are, some names are familiar to you, some are maybe Greek and Latin. They are known as Akuli, Urumi, many of you know, Tavil, Parai, Mridangam, Mattalam, Perumbarai, Panjarai, Melam, Murasu, Tamukku, Berigai, Pambai, Manmelam. Of course, we all have seen Ganjira, Aimuga Muravam, Kudugotti, or it is known as Kidikiti. These are also various folk drums commonly used and mentioned often in Saiva Tirumurai in many Padigams and lot of Chayul. Many of them often go back to more than 3,000 years in literature. Dundubi is a lot more interesting and is a colorful background. There are as many as 36 meanings or annotations for this particular term Dundubi. It talks about an Asura, it talks about another Gandharva. There are so many meanings for Dundubi if you just go into the encyclopedia or many of these Sanskrit lexicons. The pertinent one for us, for our purpose, is one commonly used in many Puranas. Dundubi is a huge drum. In fact, the term itself, I would say, is onomatopoeic or onomatopoetic, they call it. I mean, both words are synonymous, onomatopoeic or onomatopoetic, because it is something to do with the way it is sounding. That's how the name came. Dundubi came from dum dum, dum dum. That is how it started. Then became dum dum dubi. Dum dum dubi was the way it was originally. The sound that came by beating it came as dum dum dubi. It became dundubi. The English word drum must have come from this only. Drum is also drum. So that must have come from the sound as well. So it is mentioned in Rigveda, Yachiditvam grihe griha ulukala ujyase iha dyumattamam vada jayatamiva dundubihi. In Rigveda Mandala 1, in 28th Shaka, there is mention about this Dundubi. In the same Rigveda, in the 6th Mandala also, it says, Upashvasaya prithvi mudadhyam purutrate manutam vishtitam jagat sa Dundube jurindrena devaihi duradviyo apaseda shatrun. This is also Rigveda in the 6th Mandala. In same Rigveda, you see in multiple places reference to the Dundubi in context of a drum that is being played. So that is as old as Vedic times. So Amuraja Pratyavartayoho Ketumat Dundibihi Avaditi Samasparshana Ascharanti No Narosmakam Indra Ratino Jayantu. This is again Rigveda. There are so many references. Atharva Veda and many other Vedic literature also repeat this Dundubi business so many times. It's a special sort of drum which was the earthen drum made by digging a hole on the ground and covering it with a huge hide. And not one person, a couple, sometimes 2 or 3 people used to be actually using very big made up sticks to beat this and get this sound in sequence. This was employed in the Mahavrata, or called a ritual performed at the winter solstice, usually December 21st, the darkest point of the year, for the purpose of driving away the influences that are hostile to the return of the sun. So Bhumi Dundubi is mentioned in the Vedic Samhitas and Brahmanas. And lastly, let us see one reference in Taittiriya Upanishad which talks about Dundubi. Vacham avarundate bhumi dundubim agnanti eiveve mam vak pravishtatam evavarundate. Of course, it goes further to talk about the sound of Dundubi. This Taittiriya Samhita in the 7th Mandala and 5th Anuvaka. Though drums are found in all ancient civilizations from the good old Egypt to Peru, nowhere we come across such earthen drums as described in our Puranas, huge earthen drums of the nature of Dundubi. Other references in Rigveda are also about war drums. So we have already dealt quite an amount of time on Anaka and Dundubi and why Vasudeva got the name. But let's now see how Tirtha narrates in the words of ecstatic Vasudeva and Devaki singing to their own son, Bhagavan, when they realize that the cosmic Brahman himself has come down and blessed them to be born as their own son for a 3rd time. The realization sets in, and then they start singing this wonderful song in the words of Narayana Tirtha.
सर्वाधार रमापतेत भवता तच्चिन्तनीयं विभो यत्कर्तव्यम् अशेष विगुणा ब्रह्मण्य रक्षाविदो एवं रूपम् अमानुषम् एवं रूपम् अमानुषम् मुनिवरद्येयो समाच्छादय स्वामिन्मानुषबालभावम् स्वामिन्मानुषबालभावम् अधुना सन्दर्शयास्मान् प्रति
O Lakshminatha, you hold the cosmos, you are omnipotent and you are the leader worthy of worship. Ramapate Sarvadara Atha Bhavata Tachintaniyam Vibho. You have to decide whatever you think is appropriate to protect this world, because this cosmos is your creation. And that too is happen with your benevolence. And the protection also has to happen with benevolence. While we feel privileged to see you in the form that the saints and sages have been worshipping time immemorial to witness, and such a form is beyond comprehension by all of us, kindly hide this incredible Divya Swarupa with the divine insignia or ensigns, ornaments and the four hands, etc., etc. Kindly hide them. Please take the ordinary form of a human child and give us that opportunity and privilege to enjoy you thus. This is the prayer that both Devaki and Vasudeva plead to Bhagavan, who really gives them the cosmic Swarupam, the darshanam which they have been longing for millions of years. Sarvadhara Ramapate Atha Bhavata Tachintaniyam Vibho Yat Kartavyam Asesha Sesha Vibhuna Brahmanya Raksha Vidau. But Swaminne Manusha Balabhavam Madhuna Sandarsaya Asman Priti. This is how they end their request. And of course, this continues with a beautiful song as from Devaki and Vasudeva, which we'll be hearing just now.
जीव अक्षिण कृपा कटाया स्मृत पट संरक्ष सुर शेख राजीव यदाक्ष सर्ववेदान्तैकलक्ष सर्वयोगीन्द्र संरक्ष अप्रमेय बलवीर्य अनुपम महोदार्य अपरिमित गाम्भीर्य औयय खण्डितैः Acharya Achyutananda Govinda Advanta Nirmalana Vishwata Samsaragam Vishwamangala Mukunda Patita Jana Pavana Pankaja Sundaranana Padagapati Vagana Pandita Paripalana Ekaraksha Sura Siksha Rajiva Dhalaya Dagra Akshina Kripa Katagraya Srita Pakasam Rakha Sura Siksha Rajiva Dhalaya Avakarupam Haraya Sangha Samsaram Dasaya Manushakaram Deva Balaka Shariram Chintayataya Videyam Chetasachiram Manubhavya Antarayo Mabudakya Agama Brunda Samvedya Adyame Janma Sapalyam Adyame Vamsairmalyam Satyayeva Samajani Sambodhe Tvayi Bhuman Kalikalmashanasanam Kamita Palanidhanam Narayaniya Charitam Narayana Tirtha Geetam Ekaraksha Surasika Rajiva Dhalaya Daksha Akshina Kripa Kataksha Ashrita Pakasam Rakha Surasika Rajiva Dhalaya Daksha Akshina Kripa Kataksha Ashrita Pakasam Rakha
Narayana Tirtha finishes this song with a beautiful stanza. That's the last stanza is, he says, Adyame Janma Shafalyam, Adyame Vamsaha Nairmalyam, Sadyayeva Samajani Sambhute Tvayi Bhumani. Bhagavane, my life is fruitful because of you. Our lineage has become pious, pure and auspicious. Janma Shafalyam Adyame, Vamsaha Nairmalyam Adyame, Sadyayeva Samajani Sambhute Tvayi Bhumani. Today the world turned completely auspicious because of your birth. Kali Kalmasha Nasanam Kamita Pala Nidhanam Narayaniya Charitam Narayana Tirtha Geetam. This is how he concludes the song. Narayana Tirtha sings the glory of Sriman Narayana, which alone has the power to destroy the evils of Kali Yuga and also to fulfill our wishes. Kamita Pala Nidhanam, that alone is capable of giving us whatever we desire. And most important thing is Kali Kalmasha Nasanam. In order to destroy the evils of Kali Yuga filled with sins. Kali Santaranopanishad of Krishna Yajurveda is a minor Sanskrit treatise selected amongst a collection of 108 extant Upanishads, dating to at least a time before 2500 years. So the Kali Santarana Upanishad presents just 2 verses of the Mahamantra, consisting of the words Hare, Krishna and Rama. These are the only words of those Mahamantra. Hare, Krishna and Rama. And that's all that Upanishad is about. At the end of Dwapara Yuga, Narada went to Brahma and asked him, O Lord, Brahmadeva, my sire, how shall I, roaming over the earth, be able to cross Kali? How do I do the Kali Santaranam? crossing the Kali is very important, or to get out of it is not easy. How do I do that? Brahma replied, it's a very good question. Hearken to that which all Shrutis, namely the Vedas, keep secret and hidden. He says, hearken to that which all Shrutis, the Vedas, keep secret and hidden, through which one may cross the samsara, or the mundane existence of Kali. And that person shakes off the evil effects of Kali through the mere chanting of the Nama, or the name of the one and only Narayana, who is the primeval Purusha. So, the explanation goes like this. Naradaha punaprapacha tan nama kalamalata tan namala kalamalata saho vachaha hiranya garbhaha. Again, Narada asked Brahma, what is that nama? To that Brahma replies, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Iti Shodashakam Namam Kali Kalmashanasanam Nataha Parataropayaha Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. This is how the Upanishad ends. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. There are 16 words here. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. 16. Iti Shodasakam Namnam Kali Kalmashanasanam. By repeating this again and again, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, you will be able to get out of this Kali unscathed, and you will reach the abode of Paramatma. So these 16 namas or words in sequence, the way it is described in the Kali Santarana Upanishad, destroy the evil effects of Kali. No better means than this is to be seen in all the Vedas. These names destroy the avarana, or the centripetal force which produces the sense of individuality, avarana of jiva, surrounded by the 16 kalas or rays. Then, like the spear of the sun which shines fully after the clouds, this verse, Paramatman shines out of all this confusion, he shines above. Narada asked Bhagavane, O Brahma, what are the rules to be observed for chanting? To which Brahma replied that there were no rules for it. Whoever in a pure and an impure state, whether they are pure or impure, it doesn't matter. As long as they utter these namas always, they attain the same world or a proximity with, or the same form or absorption unto Brahman. This is the answer that Brahma gives to Narada. Precisely, this is how Narana Tirtha gives it. By doing those nama, Narana Tirtha finally finishes Kali Kalmashan Asanam, Kamitapala Nidanam, Narayaniya Charitam, Narayana Tirtha Geetam. That is the message which Kali Santarana Upanishad gave. We will now see how Sri Krishna explains his nature and incarnation to Vasudeva and Devaki. Because they solicited, Bhagavan had to answer them.
Iti nigadati tasmin yadavendre sabarye Iti nigadati tasmin yadavendre sabarye palabayati mirari Devaki Bhagadeyo Balabayati mirari Devaki Bhagadeyo Sakala nigama guhyo सकल निगम गुह्यं दर्शयन् श्रियभावं सकल निगम गुह्यं दर्शयन् स्वीयभावं परम करुणया परम करुणया परम करुणया सान्वयन्नेवमाग
Vasudeva requested Sriman Narayana, who was born as Chinna Krishna or child Krishna, to enlighten him of his mission. Because Bhagavan obliged from the cosmic Swarupam to that of a child. Having seen that happen, Vasudeva then makes the plea. Iti nigadati tasmin yadavendre sabharye bhava vaya timirarihi devaki bhagadeyam. Sakala nigama guhyam darshayan swiyabhavam paramakarunayatau santvayan evamaha. Please enlighten us with your mission, the purpose of your avatara. Sri Krishna, who dispels worldly fears, revealed to Vasudeva and Devaki with utmost compassion his true supreme nature, and also added that he could be comprehended otherwise only by the Vedas and scriptural discipline. But at the same time, he says pure love can also go beyond all of that, and you will be able to comprehend me with absolute love.
Devadidevam Shivasudevam Avatarayamamishwaram Devadidevam Shivasudevam Avatarayamamishwaram Devadidevam Shivasudevam Avatarayamam Ishwaram Kavataka tapasam sandoshito tavakatanayatmanavanim Kavataka tapasam sandoshito tavakatanayatmanavanim Samavadino akila saram samavadino akila saram avatarayamam ishvaro avatarayamam ishvaro devadidevam shivasudevam avatarayamam Agamandaikamanako ananyabhavam aganitaloka nayako Agamandaikamanako ananyabhavam aganitaloka nayako Veganito mogamegam vimalayogitarato Jaganakaram manekam Gatagata nivarakam Veganito mogamegam vimalayogitarato Jaganakaram manekam Gatagata nivarakam Avataraya Maheshwaram Devadidevam Shivasudevam देवम् अवतारय माम् ईश्वरो मथुरापुरम् समानय मामक योगमाया निदाभय मथुरापुरम् समानय मामक योगमाया निदाभय अत गोकुले नयमम् अनवद्यनन्दालयो विधिना कृतविनयं विविधयोगिसुगेयम् अत गोकुले नयममनवद्यनन्दालयो विधिना कृतविनय विविधयोगिसुगेयम् अवतारय मामीश्वरम् देवादिदेवं श्रीवासुदेवम् अवतारय माम् ईश्वरो सङ्कर्षणाख्यम् अव्ययं साधु विधेयं सम्पूर्णम् आश्रिताभयो सङ्कर्षणाख्यं साधु विधेयं सम्पूर्णम् आश्रिताभयं शृङ्गारादिनिलयं श्री रामनामधेयो सङ्गतं मत्सयायं सर्वलोकाभ्युदयो शृङ्गारादिनिलयो श्रीरामनामधेयो सङ्गतं मत्सयाय सर्वलोकाभ्युदयम् अवतारय मामीश्वरम् देवादिदेवं श्रीवासुदेवम् अवतारय माम् ईश्वरो सुरवैरिभूरिसङ्कुलं धरणीतलम् इदमासुरनोद्यमम् सुरवैरिभूरिसङ्कुलं धरणीतलम् इदमासुरनोद्यमम् परिभावय मामिति परमार्थगीतमिग परनारायणतीतविरचितमेतदिति परिभावय मामिति परमार्थगीतमिग परनारायणतीतविरचितमेतदिति अवतारय मामीश्वरम् देवादिदेवं श्रीवासुदेवम् अवतारय माम् ईश्वरो
As we saw in the last session, the references from Srimad Bhagavatam, when Krishna explained to Vasudeva and Devaki, Sukha concludes that section by saying to Parikshit, after thus instructing his father and mother, Sri Krishna in their presence by his internal potency, through his extraordinary powers, which are unmatched, transformed himself into a small human child. We saw that in Srimad Bhagavatam, very first canto, Ete cha hamsakalaha pumsaha. Ete cha hamsakalaha pumsaha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Radayanti Yuge Yuge. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. All incarnations, Amshakalaha, are either plenary fragments or sub-fragments of those plenary portions of Brahman. But Bhagavan Krishna is the original personality of such Brahman. All such incarnations appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. Bhagavan incarnates to protect the theists at every time. The Vedas say, we have seen that often, Natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate, natat chamaschavi adhikasya drishyate, parasya shaktihi vividaiva shruyate swabhaviki jnana balakriyacha. Svetasvatara, the Upanishad says that these are actually Veda Vakyam. Actually, Bhagavan does not give up his body. He doesn't have to. Because the body is eternal, his cosmic form is eternal, and nobody can comprehend or see. But as he can change his body or the form from the form of Vishnu to that of an ordinary human child, just like he does that, he can change his body to any form he likes. By sheer spiritual power, Bhagavan appears in everything. It can be a body of wood or even stone. He can change his body into anything because everything is his energy. Parasya Shaktihi Vividaiva Shruyate. As you saw in the slide showing the Geetam and translation, Bhagavan first explains himself as someone who can be understood only by Vedanta or the end of the Vedas. Agama Antaika Manakam Ananyabhavam Aganita Loka Nayakam. That is the way just now we saw the song, and that is the conclusion actually. Agama Antaika Manakam Ananyabhavam Aganita Loka Nayakam, and gives Vasudeva clear orders. In the song, as you may have seen there, Vasudeva tells Vasudeva so many steps. First, remember, I may be the child which you are going to carry, but I am the cosmic Brahman. Here are my orders because I have my duty to perform now. You brought me down as your son, and Brahma and everybody else pleaded that I should come down because I have a purpose to accomplish. So the first step is, I become your child as per your request. Enjoy me for a few moments, but take me to Gokulam as a child from here, and bring back from Gokulam the great Yogamaya who is born as a female child to Nandagopal's wife. Just replace her with me. You will see that my other incarnation, Sankarshana, also known as Balabhadra, in the same place where you are going to witness. As I said earlier, time has come for me to annihilate the evil horde of Asuras and other beings, and that is, the clock is ticking now. Krishna says, I can only be understood by the end of the Vedas. Agama Antaika Manakam. It is time we briefly saw the background or etymology of some often used words and terms. In the context of Agama Antaika Manakam, what is Agama Anta? Agamanta, which in other words is Vedanta. Vedanta is a word which we commonly use, quite often use, without probably getting deeper into the basis of the word and what it denotes. Vedanta is often referred to as Uttara Mimamsa, written by Badarayana, and it is one of the 6 Astika orthodox schools of Hindu philosophy. Incidentally, many of you may know, Badarayana is none else than Veda Vyasa. So, Badarayanaha If you really break it down, etymologically it is Badaryam Bavaha Fak. Badaryam Bavafak is Badarayanaha, descendant or incarnation of Badari or Achyuta. Who is that? Vedavyasa is the descendant of Achyuta, is incarnation of Bhagavan himself, as he himself has said in many places in Srimad Bhagavatam as well as in other Puranas. When we said 6 orthodox schools and Astika orthodox schools, one of which is Uttara Mimamsa and hence it is Vedanta, what do we mean by Astika, which is again often misunderstood word? Astika is one who believes in the existence of a self or Brahman. A list of 6 systems or Saddarsanas, also spelled as Saddarshanas, consider Vedas as reliable and authoritative source of knowledge. These are Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Mimamsa and Vedanta, as I said, is the ultimate even in the 6 orthodox schools. These are all the schools of Hinduism and these are classified as Astika schools. What are these 6 actually? Nyaya is the school of logic. Vaisheshika is the atomist school that believes in atomism or atomism. What is that atomist school? It is where atom is the basis of everything. And that is the school called Vaisheshika. And the third is Samkhya, the enumeration school, which most of you are aware of. Yoga is the school of Patanjali, which assumes the metaphysics of Samkhya, which we have also seen extensively in Narayaniam when we were discussing creation. The fifth in that order is Mimamsa, the tradition of Vedic exegesis. Exegesis is usually the critical interpretation. And finally, Vedanta or Uttara Mimamsa, the Upanishadic tradition. These are often coupled into 3 groups. The 6 of them have been compacted, normally talked about in consonance with one another for historical and conceptual reasons, called either Nyaya Vaisheshika or Sankhya Yoga and Mimamsa Vedanta. The 6 of the items, when you put them together into 3 groups, one is Nyaya Vaisheshika, another one is Sankhya Yoga, and the third one is Mimamsa Vedanta. The meaning of the word Upanishad, which is often assumed to be Vedanta, Upanishad is that which is most near. Again, etymologically, Upanishad. Upa is near, Ni is most, Shad is exist. It actually exists or sits very near. The Upanishads can be called Jnana-kanda of the Vedas. They describe the nature of Brahman. The figure of the Supreme Spirit Brahman exists in the Upanishads. Apparently, the Upanishads are explanations of the mantras, but they are concerned more with the allegorical significations and the mystic meanings of the tattvas or essence, of the origin of life, the world, the soul, and of course the God or Brahman. The Upanishads are the basis of the Saddarsanas, as I said earlier, the 6 systems of philosophy which we also talked about, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Mimamsa and Vedanta. The most important among them, among the Upanishads, are 108 in number, although there are many more Upanishads. The 4 Vedas are Rug, Yajus, Sama and Atharva, which you all know. Each of these 4 Vedas has a Brahmana. A Brahmana is a treatise relating to prayer and sacrificial ceremony. Then they all have the Aranyakas. Aranyakas are simplistically put forest texts, which are writings meant for the forest dwelling hermits to go and ponder deeper into. As these Aranyakas are strictly, you can call them as appendices to the Brahmanas. So each Brahmana will have at least one Aranyaka as an appendix. Then come the Upanishads as appendices to the Aranyakas. So Brahmana to Aranyaka, Aranyaka to Upanishad as appendix of Aranyakas. So these four classes of literary works. What are the four classes of literary works which we talked about? Vedas, the Brahmanas that follow, the Aranyakas which are appendix to Brahmanas, and Upanishads which are appendix to Aranyakas. These classes of literary works constitute the Vedic literature proper. This is what Vedavyasa, Krishna Dvaipayana did when he classified what appeared to be at that time as a single Veda into four different branches, and then he also classified them into sub by Brahmanas and Aranyakas and Upanishads, and lots of rishis have helped him, and so many names are given as this Brahmana or this Aranyaka is from this rishi. The Aranyakas and the Upanishads are inseparably connected with one another. Upanishads are therefore called Vedantas, or the end of the Vedas, the ultimate of the Vedas. The bulk of these Vedantas belong to different periods anterior to the later Vedic period. The students begin the study of Upanishads only after having completed the study of the mantras or the Vedic hymns and the Brahmanas, which are the ritual part of the Vedas. Simplistically put, Vedanta reflects ideas that emerged from or were aligned with the speculations and philosophies contained in the Upanishads, specifically relating to knowledge and liberation. Vedanta contains many subtraditions on the basis of a common textual connection called the Prasthanatrayi. What are they? The Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, also known as Vedanta Sutras. Brahma Sutras, or another name is Vedanta Sutras. So Upanishad, Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita collectively are known as Prasthanatrayi. All Vedanta schools in their deliberations concern themselves with but differ in their views regarding ontology, soteriology, epistemology, and that's why we see these Vedanta schools as distinct from one another, ultimately, even though the goal is the same. The main traditions of Vedanta, ultimately now we'll come to that, that's why we say Vedanta is so important in the ultimate evolutionary concept. The traditions can be listed like this. Advaita, which is monistic, most prominent of the proponent is Adi Shankaracharya, strongly believed to be from the 2nd century before Common Era. Vishittadvaita, which is qualified monism. It's also monism, all right, but it is qualified. Vishitta Advaita. Prominent scholars are Nathamani, Yamunacharya, or otherwise known as Alavandar, then Ramanuja, finally he codified it. He belonged to the beginning of the 11th century, namely 1017 to 1137. He lived a very long life of 120 years. The third in that category is Dvaita or dualism, founded by Madhavacharya, who lived between 1199 and 1278 Common Era. The fourth one, which is not normally known or normally discussed about, is Suddha Advaita. There is no confusion there, it is purely non-dual. And this particular Vedantic tradition was founded by Vallabhacharya, and he lived between 1479 and 1531. And there is one more called Beda Beda. This is also a Vedanta school. This Beda Beda is difference and non-difference, as early as the 4th century Common Era. Some scholars are inclined to consider this as a tradition rather than a school of Vedanta. Finally, there is something called Dvaita or Swabhavika Beda. In other words, it's a dualist non-dualism. It's very complex, but founded by Nimbarka in the 7th century, which is also a very interesting way of philosophy of looking at Brahman. Achintya Beda, inconceivable oneness and difference, founded by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, propagated by Gaudiya Vaishnava, are also either you can call them a school or tradition. Let us see in the next session, after Sri Krishna gave the instructions to Vasudeva, as we heard from the last song, what happens after that and what Vasudeva does. Narayana 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 Narayana. Hare Krishna Guruvayurappa Narayana.